The two most common questions people ask us about Microsoft 365 Copilot are, is my data used to train Copilot? And where is my data processed and stored? The best way to answer those questions is probably to look at how Copilot actually works behind the scenes. So if we start with a user, so let's say this is me, I'm working in my Office apps, I'm working in Teams, and I ask Copilot a question. So let's ask Copilot something like, summarize all of my emails and Teams chats with Mike over the last month and call out any outstanding actions. So Copilot needs to gather some information to answer my question. It's a process known as grounding. And in this case, Copilot is going to query the Microsoft Graph. So Microsoft Graph isn't part of Copilot. It predates Copilot. It's been around for a few years. It's a data model that joins the dots between everything you do in Microsoft 365. That's the people you work with, emails you've sent or received, the Teams chats you've had, the files you've shared, the files that have been shared with you, meetings you've attended, and so on. And you're almost certainly using the Microsoft Graph on a day-to-day basis already. So anytime you see a widget that shows you the files you've edited recently, or files that people have shared with you, or SharePoint sites that you've accessed recently, all of those insight-based experiences are driven by Microsoft Graph. Anytime you search, you're using Microsoft Graph. And one of the key principles of Microsoft Graph is it's only ever going to return stuff that you, the user, have access to. So Copilot's not going to have access to any content that the end user doesn't. That's probably the first thing that's worth clarifying. So at this point, Copilot now has the question we asked, and it's gathered a bunch of supporting information. So in this case, all of my recent email threads and Teams chats with Mike. And it's going to send all of that information together with my question over to the AI model. And Copilot uses GPT-4o. So this is a flagship multimodal model from OpenAI. Multimodal means that it can work with information in different formats, so text, images, audio, and so on. So the job of this model is not to find information. Copilot's already given it all the information it needs. The job of the model is to take that information, to reason over it, to summarize it, to filter out what's important, to rephrase it, to reword it, and so on. And that's really what large language models excel at. So we've got Copilot over here giving us a UI and doing some orchestration. And we've got the AI model over here taking that information and using it to generate a well-reasoned response. So the model does that, generates a response, which Copilot does some post-processing and sends back to the user. So to answer that first question, is my data used to train AI models? No, it's not. So this model doesn't retain any of the information we send over to it, and it doesn't change either. So GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. It's pre-trained, the training is already done. To answer that second question, where's my data stored and processed? All data storage happens in the geographic region where your Microsoft 365 data is stored. So Microsoft Graph is part of your Microsoft 365 service. Any metadata or query history that Copilot stores happens in that same place. So if your Microsoft 365 tenant is hosted in the UK, Copilot's storing data in the UK. Data processing is a little bit more complicated than data storage. The AI model runs in the Azure OpenAI service. So it's still a Microsoft service. It's running in an Azure data center, but it's not co-located with Microsoft 365. If you're in the EU, Microsoft has something called the EU data boundary, which guarantees that your data, so all of this, will never leave the EU. If you're in the UK, and we're no longer part of that data boundary, so depending on demand, this processing could be done in any Azure data center globally. But remember that this is processing only. This model doesn't store anything. No data storage takes place outside of your tenant location. Hope that helps.